My name is Cody Kraus, and I'm a real estate broker owner that's obsessed with everything real estate. Investing, building, selling, developing, farming, you name it. I've been doing this since I was 18 years old, and I've learned a ton through trial and error, and I've met some of the coolest people ever. This is a show where I invite these people on to talk about their experiences and mine, plus everything else real estate. Let's go. All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to the Everything Real Estate Show. It's been a couple weeks since my last episode, but today I have Bob Lachance with me. I'm not even familiar with Bob. This was kind of a cold intro, but it's going to be exciting to have him on my show. I got a little bit of a recap from Nick, his colleague. And Bob, why don't you introduce myself and everybody else in the audience to yourself?
Oh, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's always good to do cold intro because in real estate, there's always cold intros or cold prospecting, etc.
Yeah,
So, a little bit about myself. Grew up, played hockey for a long time. When I left school, went to Boston University for 4 years, signed a pro contract, played 8 years in the minor leagues, and then jumped into real estate back in 2004.
cool.
So I'm dating myself. Obviously, now you're not dating myself, but I'm showing everyone how old I am. So turned 52, been in real estate for a little over about 22 years, all the way from investing to having a real estate agent license to lending money to owning a virtual assistant company, coaching programs, etc. So I've done a lot in the last 22 years.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the intro. It's funny when everybody says getting into real estate, you almost have to qualify it and say, okay, real estate sales, real estate ownership, real estate investing, real estate lending. So what did that journey kind of look like from the start, and how'd you go from, I guess, professional hockey into real estate? What was the transition there?
Well, the beauty of real estate is you do not have, there's not really that many barriers of entry. So if you raise your hand, you say, I want to get into real estate, and you have a little bit of a work ethic, if you want to get into real estate investing, you do not need a license. Obviously, a real estate agency, brokerage, you need a license. So you have to go through that, which is not too tough to get that license to be able to jump in a real estate game. So I decided that I did not want to go back to school because I left my 4 year college 2 classes short of my degree.
Okay.
So it was either go back to school or obviously jump into an industry that didn't have the barriers of entry of getting a 4 year college degree. So I did a lot of research, researched real estate, and a lot of people were making a lot of money in real estate. This is back, a while back, and it's obviously still the same today. So I decided real estate was the game for me. And when I got into real estate, I first got my first flip, did a flip, and then I learned what short sales were, which means overdid a property. So I did that for a long time, and then got into a lot of different stuff within the real estate journey.
Cool. So, what'd your first flip look like when you say you started your first flip? I know a lot of people, that's kind of their idea of dipping their toes in the water. Maybe
Yeah.
it's that or like a single family home rental or a condo or maybe a pre-construction purchase. But what drove you to the flip? What were the fundamentals there that you liked the look of and you said, I can do this even though I'm brand new to it?
Yeah, my father was a contractor growing up, and I worked for him for a bit, more on the as a gopher, to be honest with you, because my father was
Yeah.
like, go for this, go for that. I didn't really learn much about the business. He never wanted us to get into it, to be honest with you. So anyway, what I learned when I was trying to figure out what industry I wanted to jump into, I bought a course that was about this thick, all about real estate, but not really anything specific. And it talked a little bit about rehabbing, talked about buying and holding, talked about, all of those things. And what piqued my interest was obviously going back and shows like Flip This House, things like that always piqued my interest. I know a lot of people, back in the day, even today, like watching YouTube channels on, individuals buying, flipping, and reselling properties. So I was interested in the same thing. And I decided to farm areas, which means driving the car, driving around neighborhoods, and seeing if there's high grass, roof that needs to be redone, etc. So drove by this one house, and I didn't have contractors at the time. I didn't understand where I was getting my money yet. all those things. So I had to find all those, which is pretty interesting. And we could talk a little about that if you want. But I was driving around neighborhoods and I saw a house, it needed a lot of work, overgrown grass, etc., and had a real estate agent sign in front of it. So called the agent, set up a showing. Now, keep in mind, I knew nothing about any of this, right? I didn't know how the process went. I just saw a phone number on a sign and called it. Said, "Hey, I want to get into, looking at this property." So they let me in, opened the door, and it was a like a big, big smell of cat urine. So I was
Yep.
like, "Oh,
I know that one very well. Yep.
yep." So walked in, and I remember reading in that course what to do and how to get rid of it, and how a lot of people actually shy away from those properties. So walked around. I think the property was listed for 185. Made an offer for, I think back, and this is again '04, for 135, and they got back to me. They accepted it, and I'm like, all right,
Wow.
what do I do
Yeah.
now? Yeah, what do I do now? I had no contractors. I didn't have money lined up. I didn't know, I had none of that set up. So picked up the newspaper back in the day, and it was called the Foothills Trader. And I got the top three contractors that were in that newspaper. So I called all of them. Only one of them responded. So obviously that was my contractor back in the day. His name was Junior, Brazilian crew. They were painters and contractors. So showed up at the job site and took us a month to rehab it. And I was back and forth to Home Depot about 9,000 times. I had
Yep.
zero systems. I had, zero anything. Ended up doing an open house, buy and sell, 2 months, made about 30, I think it's $32,000, which was pretty cool. But I also realized, I looked in the mirror, Cody, and I had no properties, and I had no other projects to work on because I had no systems. So
Yep.
that was a start.
So how'd you find the money for the first project? You said you had no contractors, no money, no
Yep.
plan, kind of. Where'd the money come from?
Money came from mortgage brokers. So this is again 2004. Picked up the phone, talked to a couple different lenders. I had a little money put away for my hockey playing days. And I also borrowed money off of my credit card back in the day. I'm not saying whether to do that or not,
Yep.
but I was looking for access to any kind of capital that I can get to. And so those are the ways that I got money.
Yeah. And that's generally, as much as people like to plan things out, that's pretty common in the way that these things start. I mean, my first one was similar. House was a disaster. It was one that had been on the market for a year. Uh, Everybody shied away from it because of all the work. And after I had
Yep.
showed it to a client and said, "Man, this place is brutal," a colleague of mine said, "Hey, why don't you go for that one? It's got a double lot, right?" Put in an
Oh yeah.
offer. I had no clue how I was going to afford it. Had a little bit of money that wasn't mine. It was, taxes I had collected on sales and had to pay back to the government yet, but I decided I should put that in down payment. Started renovating the property on credit cards, ran out of money, refi it in the middle of the process, all that kind of stuff. And that's usually how it goes. And again, not advocating, but if anybody thinks, you need to have it all together to start somewhere, it's good to be as prepared as you can, but obviously you got to do what you got to do. And sometimes that's, a partner or multiple partners. It's, money
Yep.
against your primary residence, unsecured lines of credits, private mortgages, talking to mortgage brokers, networking with whoever's got the resources. And you know what? The more you reach out to other people like that too, the more advice you'll get. Not all of it's the right advice, but a lot of times you can get bits and pieces and put it together.
There's too many times where people just sit on the sidelines because, sitting on
That's
the
it.
sidelines, you could realize it's going to be 5 and 10 years later, and you're still sitting in the same seat. I wish I did, or I should do
Yeah.
this. They never do it. So to your point, 100% right. Nothing wrong with making a little mistake once in a while.
Yeah. Now you said 32 is what you made on the first one?
Yep.
So a
Yep.
friend of mine, I met him, my second year in the business. I think I was 19 years old. He was a house flipper, and his rule was 30 grand. So
30.
he would look at a property, look at the comparables, come up with an idea of what it could go for, and he would plan, $10,000 under worst case scenario as far as sale price, and he would overestimate what he thought his repairs were going to be by 10 or $20,000. And his rule would always be there needs to be 30 grand left over with the worst case scenario on the purchase, worst case
Yep.
scenario on the sale, worst case scenario on the rehab. And if there's 30, it makes sense because if you don't end up with worst case scenario on all of them, it might turn into 40, 50, 60. But
Yep.
I think the allure that's been sold by a lot of the TV shows is, 100, 120, $140,000 in profit. And the reality is those just don't come along too often. It's not to say that it couldn't, but it probably comes on the wave of a market shift.
Yeah. Yep. And I agree. I mean, if you look at $30,000, if you do a month's worth of work and then you make $30,000, pretty good,
Yeah.
right? If you start going, 100, you're not going to be able to find as many projects within a year as you can. To your point, your buddy's got and not to mention if you put all of those safeguards in, you're probably going to average 50,
Yeah,
right? As a
yeah, exactly. Yep.
so,
And then the
uh,
one thing that a lot of people don't factor in is your carrying costs. Because it's
mhm.
ideal if it closes in 30 days and complete your renovations on time and that it doesn't spend that much time on the market. But in reality, 3 months often turns into 5 months as far as the rehab itself. Getting the property listed, there's often a delay before it goes up for sale. Maybe you don't have the furniture in or the final paint done or whatever, and then everybody would like to sell in 3 days on the market and have a 2 week closing, but in all reality, 3 days often turns into 30 days, and you're often looking at a 60 or 90-day closing period, and that's if you have a cash offer, not a conditional offer, things like that too, right?
Yeah, you nailed it on financing costs because you have traditional financing, whatever the rates are today. You also have private money or hard money, right?
Yep.
And private money is, you and I are buddies, and you say, all right, I'll give you 100% financing for 8% interest rate, no big deal. Obviously we're friends. That's more on the private side, and on the hard money side, it's hard. It's like 12% interest, 2, 3 points right off the rip, $100,000, right? If you hold it, think
Yeah.
about that. $100,000, that's $12,000 a year. If it takes you 6 months to do it, that's 6 grand plus those 3 points, which is another $3,000 on top of that. To your point, it
Yeah.
starts adding up. And you have
And I want
insurance costs, right?
and I want a personal guarantee and I want your kid's blood. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
exactly.
what market are you in, Bob? Have you always been in the same area? What area is that? Or have you been in different
Yeah,
areas?
mostly here in the U.S., Connecticut, Massachusetts, a little bit of Pennsylvania.
Okay, interesting. And so, what market dynamics are you seeing in there right now? So, I guess our northeastern
Yeah.
seaboard. Yeah,
It's actually still pretty good. It's a lot different than other places, in the world, in the country, in North America. It all is different. Everywhere you are, it seems to be changing. Price fluctuation in major cities, and some areas are just going down, and in our area, it's always stayed pretty steady.
yeah. A lot of homes being built.
Not really, not up
No.
here. I mean, there are some smaller developments. There's just not a ton of land where I am.
Yeah, and so that's probably why it's pretty steady too. If you don't have a lot of new development, then you have a
Yep.
pretty steady, I guess, inventory level where you don't have those peaks and valleys to work through.
Yeah, and we're right in between New York City and Boston. So they're right in between. So there's a lot of people that either want to get out of Massachusetts or out of New York, and vice versa.
Yeah, and so a lot of medical industry related stuff, a lot of, financial markets related stuff coming from New York. You got the medical stuff coming from Boston, lots of
Yeah.
universities all around there, lots of publicly
Got
traded companies, pretty steady
insurance too.
employment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Add in insurance on top of that. So you're 100% right.
Yeah, and Boston, Mass.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. And so kind of the I guess the way into real estate was through a flip. Then what it look like
Yep.
after that?
So after that, I actually started learning a little more about the industry and different niches. So I started learning about creative financing. I started learning about defaulted mortgages. So, it was big back. Remember when the financial, crisis hit back
Yep.
in, oh 08, oh 09. I was already educated on how that world worked. So I started getting into bank debt and things like that while I was also flipping properties, while I was also, buying and selling. I did not buy and hold at that time. I also got into a real estate education program. And I started on the education side for probably lasted for about 10 years, from 2000. I think the first time was 2007 to about, no, more than that. So until about COVID. So I was involved in a real estate education program here well, actually ended up being in all of North America. I was up in Canada, U.S., while I was also investing in properties and while I was also starting another company, virtual assistant staffing company. So I've done a lot
Cool.
within the last, you know, 15, 20 years.
Sure. So as an investor, like usually when you're selling real estate, you're licensed for example, in Canada, a province, and I would imagine it's
Yep.
for a state when you live in the U.S.
Yep.
So typically you don't practice selling outside of your state or your home province
Mhm.
unless you know you have a second home in a province or a state close by. But even then, you often rely on somebody who's an expert in that market if you're outside of your market. But then everybody's theory on investing in properties is kind of different. And so, for example, during COVID, Ontario was really the place that peaked out first like crazy,
Mhm.
and so people started going east. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. People started going west to Alberta, Calgary, and
Yep.
Edmonton specifically. And then you had a lot of people that were just done with the politics and the way everything was going in Canada, and they headed to Florida or they headed to Texas and
That was my
Mexico.
brother. That was my brother. He lived in Montreal. He's done with it.
Yeah, yeah, and so whether it was Texas or Florida, Tennessee, a lot even ended up in Mexico. I would imagine you see even more of that in the States. Like for example, we were at a church meeting yesterday, and it was kind of like a get to know you questionnaire at the beginning of it. And one of the questions was, how many people in the room? There's 42 people in the room, have lived in more than three provinces. And out of 42 people, there was, I think, two or three people that put their hands up, right? And it's like, okay, so that's maybe, 7 or 8% of a room that was surveyed there. In the
Yeah.
US, like people are much more, I guess, apt to live in multiple different cities and states, or at least that's what I feel. Is that the case? And what's their theory about investing outside of the state that they live in?
Yeah, you know what? It's, I've been part of an organization reference to investing outside. There's just more comfort. So, and there's a lot of companies out here that promote as turnkey providers. So the property
Yeah.
management companies, they go, they find properties, and there's a lot of Canadians that also invest that I know that invest in the United States. So wherever it is, if it's in Florida, if it's in Arizona, wherever it is, there are very good opportunities because someone else manages it for us, right? So if I'm going to look to buy a house in Kansas City, because that's another big area that I see a lot of people buying because there's some very, very good turnkey providers that actually go out, find properties, fix them up, and then connect with investors like myself or you or somebody else that will purchase them and then they manage them. So it's a good way to build wealth. It's a good way to build appreciation over time, of course, while paying down debt.
Sure. And diversify the holdings a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll say
Correct.
that's the one thing probably lacking from the Canadian market is just a much smaller market, right? We're 40 million
Yeah.
people in a huge landmass, and so you really only have, maybe 7 or 8 big cities and two that are substantial, maybe three. Um, but even like at a national level, there's not a lot of data on residential housing in aggregate. Like there's just not that much. In
Yeah.
in the U.S., you guys have like institutional level data available on housing, like the property management companies that are available. Incredible, the software suites that are behind them, that the ability to navigate the landlord and tenant laws, which are very different in most provinces in Canada compared to most states that you guys operate in, to even the way that you can structure the ownership, whether it's through an opco LLC, what's the home
Mhm.
state of that corporation versus where you actually reside based on tax laws, all that kind of stuff. Like there's people that I feel like have almost made an industry of just advising on how to set up your corp, what assets to buy, putting the
Mhm.
management in place, and it's widely available to mom and pop. Whereas in Canada, you kind of just got to buy the properties and wing it. I mean, you can read all the books and listen to the podcasts and get advice, but you guys almost seem to have it like to a process or a system.
Yeah, I mean, it is a full disclosure. You nailed it on the data side, right? You have data everywhere here, and you have
Yeah.
data companies that are selling for you know, hundreds of millions of dollars to each other because data is all over the place, right? You guys,
Yeah.
I know that up in Canada, it's a lot more difficult to get the data. So we have different ways that we can market down here for homes where you guys can up there. So data is 100% open here, where it's a little more closed off up there. So it doesn't give you guys, it just, it's kind of like when I first started investing in real estate back in 2004 up in Canada. It's a lot like that. I was just with my buddy that lives in Montreal, who's an investor. We were down at Tampa for a mastermind, and we were talking exactly about that, how he can market and how he can't market, what data is available, what's not available. So it's just a little different, but it's part of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and so on the institutional management side, you guys certainly have that, but then there's almost competition on the institutional holder of the asset side too, right? So like for example, there was, BlackRock buying up single family homes all across Texas and other states like that. And in Canada, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
I don't think any institutional investor would ever look at single family homes. However, there's a lot of government insured financing programs that are allowing institutional level investors to say develop an entire apartment building and hold that. And so
Right.
you're kind of seeing this divergence now in the Canadian market where all of the single family homes, very few of them are rented anymore. I think in the next few years here, it's going to be 95% plus that are owner occupied.
Yeah.
And on the apartment side, they're almost all going to be held by our TSX, Toronto Stock Exchange, is Bay Street. So normally you guys would say Wall Street or whatever, but for us it's Bay Street, level investors where they'll
Yeah.
buy the entire apartment building in multiple cities or the plazas. You have almost no mom and pop investors anymore is the trend that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit different in small town Ontario versus, Ottawa, Montreal, Calgary, Vancouver, but that's the way I see it going. But in the States, I feel like you guys still got a lot more of that American dream where mom and
Yeah.
pop, can build a portfolio, and there's different financing options there too.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's the opportunity in Canada will be to, I don't know, buy a 5 to 10 unit and create townhouses in them, and then just start an HOA. Maybe that's an opportunity for the smaller player. Of course, not everyone has institutional money. Not many of us
Yeah.
have institutional money,
No.
but maybe that's something to look into as well, and all throughout Canada.
Yeah. So you started flipping, you started investing, you're probably doing some buy and hold, maybe not just in your home state or your hometown, but other markets that look good too to
Yep.
diversify that a little bit. Um, and then, so you mentioned you got your real estate license. Was that more to help other people, or was that to facilitate a lot of your own transactions on the investing side? And what did that story look like?
That was mostly this is so I got my license in 2005, just to gain access to the MLS, just more on the investing side. Also with the idea of maybe if I want to buy my own house, I could get the commission, or if I had a relative in the area that wanted to buy a house, maybe I'll bring them around. I never really enjoyed, to be 100% transparent with you, driving around showing people properties. To me, that just wasn't my passion. It was more on the investment side. But using your license as an asset, I think, is very, very important. So no matter what, I think anybody who's in real estate, whether they're, buying and holding, doing rehabs, they should, or I recommend they do get their real estate license, because there's more opportunities. It's also it's something like, Cody, I know if you have your license and I have my license, there's more of a bonding there as well. So I
Or
think it's very,
trust?
very important. Yeah, trust, bonding, etc.
Yeah. Cool. And so what's it look like today? I know you mentioned that, okay, so flips, holds, sales, you're in the coaching world, and you got a Riva Global Virtual Assistants logo behind you. So what's
Yep.
everything look like today?
It's good. So in my office here, that's where I run my Reba Global company out of, which is a virtual staffing company. I started that in 2014. We also have a real estate investment company here. We bought, I think at the peak, I had over 20 properties down in Florida. I'm looking to liquidate them right now. I personally don't like buying and holding. And so
Okay.
for me, it's just more of a pain because I already have a service business. So we, buy and sell. We're doing a lot more, clean up, fix out, and resell now. So as the market changes, I think for anyone in real estate, you have to change with it, right? So
Yep.
I think that's very, very important for anybody listening to understand that you have to change. Also, when you've been in this business, I think I said this, I spoke last week at our mastermind, and there's a lot of new people that are in the in the seats, and I said, where you start in real estate most likely won't be where you'll end. I mean, you've been in business what since you started this when you're 18.
Yep.
Never had a podcast back in the day. You probably weren't a broker. You didn't do what you're
No.
doing, today when you started. So I think it's very important. And what you're doing is obviously fantastic because you're educating individuals to get in the business, to stop thinking about it, get off the sidelines, and put your foot in the ring.
Well, and to your point, kind of when you first started, you got to start somewhere, right? And
Yep.
so, yeah, you got to pivot along the way, but sometimes you just got to go and you'll make mistakes along the way, learn from them, pivot and move in another direction if you have to, or if one part of that worked, keep that part going and change the other part. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, what kind of I guess virtual staffing is it? Is this like I hire somebody in the Philippines to do my administration work, or what's it look like?
Yeah. So I mean, all my virtual assistants are the Philippines. I go there 2 times a year. So we have, I think probably at about 650 today, virtual assistants all over North America, that do, anywhere from admin work, marketing work, social media work, posting, etc. So they run the gamut in the real estate world.
Yeah. Now I know our photography company, Mel and Jared, they do a great job marketing our product, and I always wondered how they got, 24-hour turnaround on their photos and video. And then I realized it's because they have an assistant named Job who's out of the Philippines,
Yep.
steady employee that's worked for them for years. And so he uploads all of his photo and video file at night after he's done shooting everything, goes to sleep, wakes up in the morning, and everything's ready for him to
All
send
right.
out for all the realtors that he shoots for. Is that a big part of the advantage is the differing time zone? Or maybe what is it specifically about the people of the Philippines that you find really
Yeah.
complements, North American work environment?
Well, people from the Philippines, it's a very service based culture.
They're very
And they look at
hospitable.
yeah, very, very. And they look at your business as their business, and they really take it to heart. And English is one of their primary languages over there, and it's always worked. Just incredible, incredible culture over there, and which fits with, our culture over here in North America.
Cool. Now, what industries are you seeing, I guess, benefit from virtual assistants? And are you like originally, I imagine you probably got a lot of pushback, especially pre-COVID when, people never worked from home or anything like that. So is there an industry that you haven't seen it benefit or, is it generally acceptable now or is it becoming even more and more common?
Yeah, I think it's generally acceptable. And one of the main reasons why is every single state here in the U.S., minimum wage keeps rising.
Yeah.
So, and if you've ever hired someone that has not gotten a 4-year college degree at minimum wage, the level of education is not high enough to what we need. Especially here in Connecticut, our minimum wage keeps rising and rising and rising. It doesn't mean their educational level rises. It just means
Your
minimum
cost.
wage
Yeah.
keeps going up and costs go up. So we as small business owners have no choice but to look all over the world on where we could get some incredible help. And our Philippine workers have 4-year college degrees, etc. So it just benefits us to move in that direction.
Okay. Now, this question is totally off base from the discussion about virtual assistants, but you mentioned you started in '04, '05. You rode that into the, 2008, 2009 recession, and you mentioned the word short sale. So that's something
Mhm.
that a lot of people, niched down on and
Yeah.
found, it as an opportunity because it was something new and presented itself, but it's not understood by a lot of people. And so my question is, what is a short sale? When does it make sense to consider that as an opportunity, whether I'm the property owner, a property purchaser, or the real estate agents that's helping the sale process? And then also like it hasn't really been a thing that's been talked about the last number of years because we've generally
Mhm.
had a bull market, basically
Yeah.
since the '08 recession until we've had a much of a price correction in Canada in the last, it started in 22 and we're still experiencing it now where prices have reset by about 25%. But you guys didn't have the same spike up in most of the states. that we did in Canada, at least not to that percentage level. And I don't think there's been too many examples of short sales in Canada. So for us, um, I don't know if ignorance the right word, but uninformed of short sale Canucks, explain the whole short sale process
Yeah.
and what opportunities lie in that.
Yeah, short sale is it's just very simply put. If your property value decreases, let's say you buy a house today for 300,000, next year now the value is 200,000, just
Yep.
as an example. And I believe in Canada, you guys have to put 25% down. Is that correct?
So we put as little as 5% down on an insured
Correct.
mortgage with a government
Yep.
insurer, but a conventional mortgage is at least 20.
Yeah. So you go 20, let's use that example. So that's $60,000, right? 20,
Yep.
20% of 360. So now you owe 240. If the property value goes down to 200, you're $40,000 underwater.
Yep.
So a short sale means if you need to sell the property today, the bank has to accept short of what's owed. So that's considered what a short sale is. And that's why there's more short sale opportunities in the United States than there are in Canada because, if you're insured, you probably have different programs. If you have 5% down, if it's backed by the government, but if you put 20% down, it's really difficult for that value to go down that quickly, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well,
So
so for example, there was an article that came out in Canada just in the last couple of weeks here, and it was about the number of homes that are selling that have been purchased, in 2021, 2022 that are reselling, and something like 25% of them are selling at a loss right now.
really,
Right, and that's
yeah.
huge. And so to actually sell at a loss without going through a short sale process, the seller's got to come up with money at the closing table, right? So essentially, in your example, I owe 240, the house is worth 200. If I go sell it for 200, not only do I have to come up with that 40 that's missing, but then I also got to come up with the closing costs associated with it too, right?
Yep.
And so if I understand correctly, a short sale would kind of be like a consumer proposal in the idea where I go to the institution and say, hey, look, I have someone that's willing to take 200,
Mhm.
um, and I know I owe 240, but rather than you go in power of sale or for closing on my property, would you just consider accepting what they're willing to pay and then wiping my debt? Is that essentially a short sale?
That's well put, well
Okay.
explained. Yep,
Yeah, and
exactly.
and why would a bank be willing to do that?
Because of the cost, the banks are in business to lend money. They're not in the business to own properties. That's why. Meaning, think about that. If I'm not paying, if you're the bank and I'm not paying you, that means you can't lend that money seven times over to somebody else,
Yeah.
right? That means that's why they're losing money. And when I first started, it was a harder concept to understand, but now I understand how, what banks do when when you put money in the bank, how they lend it out, five, six, seven, eight times for that $1.
Well, and even like we talked about on the flip side of it, your holding costs can really, you might even have your resale, your reno, your purchase costs all nailed down, and you figured your profits are going to be $40,000, but your holding costs could be $4,000 a month. And if you ended up holding the property 5 more months than you expected, well, now all of a sudden that's $20,000 less profit, right? So the bank knows that there's management fees, maintenance fees,
Mhm.
utilities, insurance, everything associated with keeping a vacant property. And then
Yep.
generally vacant properties don't sell as well as an owner occupied property either, right?
Correct. Correct. So you add all those up, we could all do the math on a $300,000 or $240,000 mortgage. That adds up to your point. And a vacant property, sometimes you have, which oftentimes you have individuals that go in and vandalize it, some of them move in, now you have to evict them. It's
Squatters.
just
Yeah.
crazy. Oh yeah, squatters, all that.
Leaks, stale
Yep.
air,
Oh yeah. Freeze
insurance
damage,
costs.
right? Up in Canada, freeze
Yep.
damage 100%.
Yep.
So
No, it's neat. Do you see that entering back into the market right now in certain states or I mean, I know your
we're
expertise isn't the Canadian market, but we just dealt with one inside of our office where it was kind of along the lines of that, and we got lucky and we sold the property and all the costs got covered just barely. But in the event that they didn't get covered, I wonder if that mortgage provider would have considered a short sale, because maybe if we're $20,000 short on a
Mhm.
$300,000 loan, again, the cost of transferring ownership, maintenance, management, holding costs, opportunity costs where the money could have been like, do you see that as something maybe entering the market here again soon?
Yeah, well, we're seeing it tick up here more in certain areas, like the down in Florida, you're seeing it tick up. In certain areas, around the north also. Foreclosure rates are ticking up, or noted, we call them notice of defaults. Default payments are starting to tick up a little bit again.
Yeah. And what's the lending temperature like right now, or the atmosphere like right now? Are banks eager to lend right now? Are they being very scrutinous of the borrowers? Are they pro on real estate? Do they like other stuff better?
I think right now they're still pro. We have not seen a challenge at all in our area with lending and restriction of credit, etc. So they've been actually okay. Like I said, in our area, they've been, very, very, I guess say open with it. They haven't been stringent at all.
Okay. Yeah, it's different in Canada. We have, six
Mhm.
major banks. We got some credit unions, and the one of the three major insurers is a branch of the federal government. It's a crown corporation, right? So we're a
Yep.
lot more limited with the bank's lending ability here. So typically when one's adjusting, their risk, then it affects the market broadly, where in the States you guys have thousands of banks. And I know that's even significantly less than you used to have because it used to be in the tens of thousands of banks, but even still, you have thousands of options now, and each institution has, different ability and risk appetites, all that kind of stuff, with the exception of once the insurer is involved. That's kind of more broad sweeping, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. So yeah, I mean, you nailed it there. It's, you know what? Like you said before, there's market swings and everything. No, we're kind of we're outside COVID, we're past COVID, so typically things loosen up, but now you have inflation that goes up with all the, oil going on in the Middle East, things like that. So, markets always move up and down.
Yeah. Now, the talk of Canada is we pay more attention to your guys' politics than we do to our own politics. And so, like, the thing that we've talked about for, 2, 3 years is tariffs. Is that even a thing that's discussed as Americans?
Nobody talks about it at all anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah. And for us, it makes sense. Our number one, import and export partner is the United States. I would imagine from an import basis, um, you guys would the proportions are, I would imagine, vastly different from how much you're getting around the globe versus we are. Because even probably a lot of stuff that we might get from, China or Mexico might even come through the United States, right?
Yeah.
So I
Are
guess.
you guys still getting hit pretty good right now?
Yeah, the tariffs are certainly having an impact on a lot of industries. For example, I have friends that are in steel manufacturing, and just
Mm-hmm.
depending on the type of the product that you steel manufacture, some are exempt from the tariffs and others are not. So they might even have to, pivot from the type of industry that they're supplying to all of a sudden not be under tariffs. And all of a sudden that could change tomorrow, and the codes that they're given that they have to charge tariffs on from an export standpoint, well, all of a sudden what we're making today could be susceptible to tariffs tomorrow. And
Right.
so it's making a lot of lenders walk on eggshells. A lot of people that rely on import and export, like it's a game changer. Um, I'm involved with a youth center in one town over in Leamington here, and we do kind of like a Dragon's Den or Shark Tank like business pitch style
Yeah, yeah,
competition.
yeah.
And one of our winners in the past, she manufactures her own skipping ropes. And originally she was selling a lot of them to the United States, and all of a sudden she had to shift her strategy and look at
Wow.
other countries like Europe and boosting sales in Canada because there was a tariff on a skipping rope.
It is crazy. I mean, it makes you as a small business owner be as creative if you still want to own a business. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and back to our other conversation, you got to pivot. All business owners,
Yeah.
not just real estate.
100%. Yep.
Well, Bob, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me in front of our audience today. Anything that you want to leave us with at all? I guess anywhere they can follow you online, take a look at your virtual assistant company if they have any curiosity in that.
Yeah, you can definitely check us out at Reva Global, REVA Global.com. If you have any questions, you can jump on a call with our team. and they could walk you through any questions that you have. But some, just some words of wisdom or takeaway is when we talked a little bit about it is if you're thinking about jumping into real estate, it's always a good time because real estate's always going to be good. There's always going to be houses that people need. People need shelter. So I would definitely recommend this industry over any other industry.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Bob.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks, Cody. Appreciate it. Bye.
Yep. Bye. Thanks for listening to the show, folks. Please keep in mind that this show is not offering legal, financial, or accounting advice, but rather opinions and experiences in the world of real estate from the host and the guests. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and share with your friends and colleagues. And if you think that there's someone that needs to be on this show, please feel free to connect them with me. Or if there's a topic that should be discussed, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much, and bye for now.